My name is Tim Worcester with Hilltop Farms. We're in the southwest corner of Iowa, Sidney, Iowa, and beautiful place to farm.
I'm Kyle Johnson.
We grow corn and soybeans, 50-50 crop rotation. They get sprayed early with a pre-emergent on the corn and beans, and then we go over the top of the beans with Roundup, usually from mid-June to the end of July. We roughly run a total of 4,500 acres. We spray all of our corn once, 1,500 acres, all of our beans with pre-1,500 acres, then we go over the top with Roundup, and that's an additional 1,500. We spray road ditches, grass back terraces, so I would say we're close to 5,000 a year. Custom spraying, we did some in the earlier years. It was at their time frame, not ours. When they get behind, they'll push a windy day, and we can go out and spray when we want and quit when we want. And if the wind gets a little questionable, we can hold off and start the next day. Where a commercial applicator will show up, spray all day long, whether it's windy or not, just to cover the ground. Not trying to put their job down. They got a big job ahead of them, and they're trying to stay in front of it. But we like doing things on our time frame. Sometimes it was late. That's what promoted us into, I guess we started out with a pulled type, went to a self-propelled. Hydrostat machines at the beginning. Found out that hydrostat motors was very, very expensive. It's a crapshoot as far as, is your motor good or is it not? We had one that had been rebuilt, and it ran one season and it went out, and I was in the middle of transferring from one field to another, and when it locked up, and it was the new $9,000 motor that we'd put on. I guess probably what put us over the top as far as being done with hydrostat drive. Once we rebuilt a couple hydrostat motors, when we started looking at the Apache is what kind of triggered our interest in the mechanical aspect of it, get away from those $10,000 wheel motors to rebuild. And so far we've been very pleased with it. Pull type's probably the slowest. It would tie up a tractor. You would run over quite a bit more crop. There's just more wheels on the ground. When you turn, we farm in the hills. We're about 70% hill farmers. And when you're following the contour of the ground, the sprayer does not follow straight behind the tractor. So you would fudge as much as you could to try to keep the sprayer two wheels off the row, and it was a challenge. And when you got into a situation where you had to back up, it was like backing a trailer, not a big deal, but you did run over more crop. We had a Hagee. The front booms were a wonderful idea in theory, but when it come down to it, if you're putting any kind of liquid fertilizer or nitrogen through it of any description, you were putting it all over your sprayer. And your sprayer continually was coated. And even getting into the cab, if you didn't wear gloves, clear into the cab, you touched something that had spray on it. And you get some drift with these on windy days finishing up, but with that particular sprayer, you were spraying everything in front and driving into the spray all day long. You had to go with like wheel track sprayer, a nozzle right behind the wheel, because the front-mounted sprayers, one of their biggest problems was they would have grass or weeds in the wheel tracks. And once you disturb that weed, whether you sprayed it or not, and you get a rain within 12 hours, it didn't soak into that plant, it got washed off. Hence, that's why the front-mounted spraying behind you, it just seems to work nicer. Surprisingly enough, being a two-wheel drive machine, it was very surprising. I ran the two Hagees, which were four-wheel drive hydrostats, and I would have to say that this two-wheel machine will go everywhere that the four-wheel drives will. I can't really explain how it does it, but I have been in both, and it seemed like they fight each other on the four-wheel drive. I don't know if that's possible, but it does feel like it pulls down, where this rear-wheel drive, I've cut 2-foot deep ruts with the 850, This is new enough. I haven't been in wet conditions, but you knew it was soft, which is to be expected, but it handled it fine. I knew I could make one more pass and call it quits. It was a bottom wet piece, so this gets around well enough that if we need four-wheel drive to go any farther than what we're doing, we don't need to be there. Last plan of attack is aerial spraying, but if it's that wet, we're already looking at almost a failed crop anyway. So at the point where you can't get through it with two-wheel drive, don't waste your money on chemical. You're just throwing, good money after bad. So back then it was all foam, where we've gone with more guidance systems and GPS. Now you're just talking basic technology. But at that point, for a reference point, we had foam that would dissipate on a hot day in anywhere from 7 to maybe 15 minutes. And if you didn't have dye in there, which was a nightmare, because if it spilled or got on anything, it was dye. It would stick to you. So if you couldn't see the dye well enough in the foliage, you were just guessing, and probably money-wise, going with a GPS system, 90-foot booms, with a small amount of drift you have from GPS, you're covering so much ground it just doesn't show up. With 90-foot booms, you can cover so much so quick. Roughly, we're running $32 an acre for corn herbicide, $14.75 an acre first pass on bean pre-herbicide. I imagine our savings is probably anywhere from 9 to 11% of that per year, just from a GPS standpoint of having accuracy instead of going by foam that dissipates. And pretty soon you see a dye mark and it's halfway in your boom, you're overlapping 25 feet. So you got to assume that you're getting a lot of, and we got auto boom shut off. So there's no way to double spray anything. If you've sprayed it, it won't come on.
We got one farm that's a leased farm that is our steepest, and going along with the hill, following the channel of the terrace. We do cross some of them. Our farmables we can cross, but we don't cross the push-up terraces with the grass on the back. The machine it follows along real nice as far as following along the channel when you're spraying. I've crossed some pretty steep terraces, and it handles it just fine. Power-wise, it handles it just fine. Well, we don't haul the machine to any of our farms. The farthest farm from here is, 15, 16 miles.
Yeah. I rode it at home this last time and emptying it 40 downhill and 34 uphill and 36 on the flat.
I've had it up to, somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 miles an hour, empty, going down the road. And as far as traveling down the road, it handles nice.
Like right now, we're spraying half a mile away, and we'll fill here and go up and spray there. Some it's sitting in the field, some we'll road down by the golf course. We'll road 5 or 6 miles loaded at a reduced speed. We usually don't go past fifth gear, half throttle. We like to keep it a little lower. It's a lot of weight.
It usually takes, depending on what the mix is, 30 minutes to fill. And I don't know, from up there, it probably takes 10 to 15 minutes. From filling right here to travel down there, I'd say 10 to 15 minutes down and 10 to 15 minutes back up. So, maybe an hour between fills.
He talks about 400 acres a day, all day. That's include moving. That's include setting at the edge of the field, programming the computer for the new field, and bringing up your maps and going and filling and coming back. So actual spray time, probably 7 hours. Rest of the time is filling, driving, and programming. visually walking around the machine and the simplicity of it, you can see most potential problems that are starting, if there is any. We've had just 2 breakdowns. One was major, one was a drive line, and it just looked like the weld on the slip yoke didn't get penetration, and it just slipped and spun and dropped down, and it busted a valve and started dumping chemical. He was a third full. Kyle jumped out and shut everything off. I called our local dealer, which was about an hour and 15, 20 minutes away. They did not have the parts, but they had a new machine sitting there, and they said by the time we got there, they would have it pulled off and ready. They were willing to bring it down to us, but we were in a time frame where we wanted to finish before dark, and we broke down at 3:30, tore it apart. When we got there, they handed us everything we needed. We were back and running at 6:45. But they were willing to do whatever it took to get us running, and that was what they told us on the phone. Head this way, we got what you need, we'll take off a machine, whatever you do need. On the dollar side of it, we've got roughly $158,000 in this machine, and we were looking at some rogators with up to, say, 1,000 hours on them that were going from 120 to 150,000. We got full warranty, brand new machine for a little over $150,000, fully set up and ready to go to the field. On the dollar figure side of it, dollar for dollar, you're getting, I'd say, above the value. We have mostly John Deere equipment, and we had them price us out a new $87.30, and the price was well over $200,000. And that wasn't spec'd out probably quite as well as this. Had a lot of options on it that I didn't see that a private individual would use. I could see some of the different capabilities of adding chemical, but we have one mix for corn and one mix for beans. As a private individual, I don't see where some of those, sometimes you pay for frills you don't need. In dollars, roughly $26,000 a year is what we would pay out for commercial spraying. We figure with updating every 2 to 4 years, depending on crop years and how well things do, we can get about 80% of our initial cost of the machine back, and you're looking at $26,000 a year for custom spraying if we was to pay it. So in 3 years, we're out a little over $75,000, and we probably won't lose $35,000 on trade and $35 to $40 in 3 years. It's a great tax write-off. It's an expense on the farm. We got good trade-in. There's a good market for these in the Midwest, and our trade-in value was real well, and kind of promoted us to stay with the Apache.